Hello, night wanderers. Welcome back to The Pale Watcher. I know many of you use these stories to drift into sleep, so before we begin our journey tonight, take a moment to get comfortable. Adjust your pillows, pull your blankets a little closer, and if you're enjoying what we do here, please consider subscribing and letting me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Tonight's story is about inheritance, not just of money or property, but of secrets, of debts that echo through generations, of doors that should never be opened. So settle in, relax, and let me tell you about the house on Mercy Hill. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, which somehow made it worse. Tuesdays are meant to be unremarkable, the forgotten middle child of the week, but there it sat on my kitchen counter, cream-colored paper, with my name written in fountain pen, the ink a deep burgundy that looked disturbingly like dried blood. Cassandra Vale. I hadn't been called by my full name in years. Everyone knew me as Cassie. The formality of it made my skin prickle. I'd been living in my studio apartment in Seattle for 3 years, working as a freelance graphic designer, scraping by on coffee and commission work. My life was small, manageable, predictable. The letter promised to change all that. Inside, the message was brief. Dear Ms. Vale, it is my duty to inform you that your great-uncle, Silas Grimwood, has passed away. As his sole surviving relative, you are the beneficiary of his estate, including the property known as Grimwood Manor on Mercy Hill, Connecticut. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to arrange the transfer of assets. Time-sensitive matters require your immediate attention. Sincerely, Theodore Wren, A.Q., Wren and Associates. I read it 3 times, each pass making my stomach tighten a little more. I had never heard of Silas Grimwood. My family tree was sparse. My parents had died in a car accident when I was 12, and I had bounced through foster care until aging out at 18. No aunts, no uncles, no cousins at holiday dinners. I was alone, and I'd made peace with that. Yet here was proof that I wasn't as alone as I had thought. Somewhere in Connecticut, a man I'd never met had left me everything he owned. The rational part of my brain screamed that this was a scam, but the letterhead looked legitimate, embossed, and official. And there was something else, a small detail that made my breath catch. At the bottom of the letter, beneath the lawyer's signature, was a handwritten note in different ink. Come quickly. The house is waiting. I called the number on the letterhead the next morning. A receptionist with a pleasant, practiced voice confirmed that yes, this was legitimate, and yes, I needed to come to Connecticut to sign the necessary paperwork. Mr. Wren would prefer to discuss the details in person, she said, her tone shifting slightly. There are complications with the estate. What kind of complications? A pause. It's better discussed face to face, Ms. Vale. When can we expect you? 3 days later, I was on a plane to Hartford, watching the clouds drift below like scattered thoughts. I had packed light, just a weekend bag. I'd sign the papers, assess the property, and probably put it on the market. Whatever a decrepit house in rural Connecticut was worth, it was more than I had now. The lawyer's office was in a small town called Ashford, about 40 minutes from Hartford. The drive took me through winding roads lined with trees that seemed to press in from both sides, their branches forming a canopy that filtered the afternoon sun into dappled shadows. It was mid-October, and the leaves were at peak fall color, brilliant oranges and reds that seemed beautiful but instead felt vaguely menacing, like flames frozen mid-flicker. Wren and Associates occupied a converted Victorian on Main Street. Inside, the smell of old books and furniture polish wrapped around me. The receptionist, a woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled into a severe bun, looked up from her desk. Ms. Vale. I nodded. Mr. Wren is expecting you. Second door on the left. Theodore Wren was younger than I had imagined, maybe mid-40s, with wire-rimmed glasses and the kind of pale complexion that suggested he didn't see the sun much. He stood when I entered, extending a hand. Ms. Vale, thank you for coming on such short notice. His grip was firm but cold. "Please, sit." The office was lined with bookshelves, every surface covered in legal volumes and file boxes. On his desk sat a thick folder with my name on it. "I'll get straight to the point," Wren said, settling into his chair. "Your great-uncle Silas lived alone in Grimwood Manor for the past 60 years. He was a reclusive man. No visitors, minimal contact with the outside world. His only connection was through correspondence with this office regarding financial matters." "How did he die?" I asked. His fingers drummed once on the desk. Natural causes, officially. He was 93, but he trailed off, seeming to choose his words carefully. The circumstances were unusual. He was found in the basement of the manor, surrounded by what the police report described as ritualistic items. Nothing illegal, mind you, but strange enough to raise questions. A chill crept up my spine. "What kind of items?" "Candles, arranged in specific patterns, symbols drawn on the floor in chalk, a journal filled with writings in a language the investigators couldn't identify." He opened the folder and slid a photograph across the desk. I picked it up, my hands suddenly cold. The image showed an elderly man lying on a stone floor, his body positioned with unnatural precision, arms crossed over his chest, legs straight, eyes closed. Around him, dozens of white candles formed a perfect circle. The symbols drawn on the floor looked ancient, almost organic, like something grown rather than drawn. The authorities ruled it a death by natural causes during some kind of personal ritual. Eccentric behavior, nothing more. But I've been managing his affairs for 20 years, Miss Vale, and I can tell you this. Silas Grimwood was not a man who did anything without purpose. Why didn't anyone contact me before, when he was alive? He specifically forbade it. His will was very clear. You were to inherit everything upon his death, but not before. He wanted no contact with you while he lived. He leaned forward, his voice dropping. He also left instructions that you should read his journal before making any decisions about the property. He was quite insistent about that. He pulled a leather-bound book from the folder and placed it on the desk between us. The cover was old, the leather cracked and worn, with no title or markings. "This is his personal journal," Wren said. "I haven't read it. That was another stipulation. It's for your eyes only. But Miss Vale, before you take it, I want to be clear about something." His eyes held mine, and I saw genuine concern there. "You are under no obligation to keep the property. You can sign it over to the state, sell it sight unseen, walk away entirely. In fact," he hesitated, "I would strongly recommend that option." My hand hovered over the journal. "Why?" "Because in my 20 years of dealing with Silas Grimwood, I came to understand that some inheritances come with debts attached. And those debts don't always die with the person who incurred them." I should have listened. I should have signed whatever papers would release me from this inheritance and walked away. But curiosity is a powerful thing, and loneliness even more so. The idea that I had family, even one I'd never met, even one now dead, it pulled at something deep inside me. I picked up the journal. "I want to see the house," I said. Wren sighed, as if he'd expected this, but hoped otherwise. "Very well, I'll arrange for the keys and directions, but Miss Vale, read the journal first, before you go to Mercy Hill, please." The motel room smelled of bleach and sadness. I sat on the edge of the bed, the journal heavy in my lap, and tried to steady my breathing. Outside, the Connecticut dusk was settling into true darkness, the kind of deep black you don't get in cities. I opened to the first page. The handwriting was cramped and precise. The ink faded in places. The date at the top made me blink. March 3rd, 1963. "If you're reading this, I am dead, and you are Cassandra, my great-niece, the last of the Grimwood line. I have never met you, and for that I am both sorry and relieved. Sorry because you deserve to know your family. relieved because knowing us would have been a curse far worse than ignorance. But now you must know, because the inheritance is not the house or the money. The inheritance is the debt, and the debt, dear Cassandra, is hungry. I felt my pulse quicken. This wasn't the writing of a madman. It was too controlled, too deliberate. Whatever Silas had written, he believed it completely. Let me begin with the truth of our family. The Grimwoods have lived on Mercy Hill for 8 generations. We did not choose this place, it chose us. Or rather, it claimed us as payment for a bargain made long ago. In 1847, my great-great-grandfather, Malachi Grimwood, was a desperate man. His wife had died in childbirth, his crops had failed for 3 consecutive years, and debt collectors were circling like vultures. He had nothing, no money, no prospects, no hope. That's when he found the door. It wasn't hidden, you understand. It had always been there, in the basement of the old farmhouse that stood where the manor now sits. A door of black wood, carved with symbols that predated any known language. No handle, no hinges visible, yet it was clearly a door. And Malachi, in his desperation, knocked. Something answered. I don't know what words were exchanged. Malachi's own journal fragments, hidden in the walls of the house, discovered by accident in renovations in 1922, are barely coherent, but the bargain was made. Prosperity for the Grimwood family, wealth beyond measure. In exchange, we would keep the door closed. We would be its wardens, its guards, and every 25 years, on the autumn equinox, we would feed it. I stopped reading, my mouth suddenly dry. Feed it. The words seemed to pulse on the page. You're thinking I'm mad. I understand. I thought the same when my father told me this story on my 18th birthday, but then he showed me. He took me down to the basement and he showed me the door. It's still there, Cassandra, waiting, always waiting. The terms of the bargain are specific. Every 25 years, a Grimwood must perform the feeding ritual. It requires 3 things: a living sacrifice, the blood of the family line, and the speaking of words older than humanity. Miss the appointed date, and the door opens on its own. And what comes through? I've seen it try once. When I was 37, my father fell ill with pneumonia in the weeks before the equinox. He was too weak to perform the ritual, and I hesitated. I thought perhaps if we just ignored it, the door would remain closed, that the whole thing was simply family madness, passed down like a hereditary disease. I was wrong. 3 days before the equinox, the sounds started. Scratching from behind the door, whispers in languages that made my nose bleed when I tried to understand them. The temperature in the house dropped so low that frost formed on the inside of the windows. And the dreams. I won't describe the dreams. On the night of the equinox, I performed the ritual. I had no choice. The door was beginning to splinter, cracks spreading across its surface like lightning. Through those cracks, I could see... No, I won't write that either. Some things once described gain a kind of reality they shouldn't have. I performed the ritual. The door held. And it has held every 25 years since. The last feeding was September 22nd, 1988. I'm writing this in 2013, 25 years later. My time is measured in hours now. I can feel it. The cancer is in my lungs, my liver, my bones. I won't live to see the next equinox. That responsibility falls to you, Cassandra. I'm sorry. God forgive me. I'm so sorry. But there is no one else. The blood must be Grimwood blood. The bargain is bound to our family line. If you refuse, if you walk away, the door will open, and what comes through will not stop with Mercy Hill. It will spread, seeking sustenance until it finds you. Distance means nothing to it. Walls mean nothing. Time itself bends around it. You have one choice. Perform the ritual on September 22nd, 2013. 1 month from when you're reading this, if my calculations are correct. The equinox falls on that date this year. In the basement, behind a false wall in the northeast corner, you'll find everything you need: instructions, tools, the words. Do this, and you buy another 25 years of safety for yourself, for the world. Then perhaps you can find a way to break the bargain entirely, though I never could. Or refuse and face what comes. But know this, I've seen it. I've heard its hunger. Death would be a mercy compared to what it does to those it catches. The choice is yours. The debt is yours. The door is yours. I'm sorry, Silas Grimwood. My hands were shaking so badly that I had to set the journal down. This couldn't be real. It was the ramblings of a disturbed old man who'd lived alone too long, whose mind had turned his family history into gothic horror. Yet something cold had settled in my chest, as if a part of me I didn't know existed was whispering, "Yes, this is true." I checked my phone, October 15th, 2013. 7 days until September 22nd. No, not September 22nd. The calendar on my phone showed October, but Silas had written September, a month from when I'd received the letter. I pulled out the letter from my bag, checking the date, September 15, 2013. My hands went numb. The letter had arrived on what I thought was October 8th, but according to the postmark, it had been sent September 15th, 3 weeks ago. Time. Something was wrong with time. I grabbed my laptop, pulling up a calendar. The autumn equinox for 2013 was September 22nd, 9 days ago. 9 days. The ritual hadn't been performed. The door should have opened. Or was opening. I was driving my rental car through increasingly dense forest, the afternoon sun barely penetrating the canopy. The road had narrowed from 2 lanes to 1.5, then to barely more than a paved path. Branches scraped the sides of the car like skeletal fingers testing for weakness. The lawyer had given me directions. Turn onto Mercy Hill Road at the old stone church, follow it 3 miles, the manor would be on the left. Simple enough, except the stone church had been abandoned, its windows empty sockets staring at nothing. And Mercy Hill Road didn't appear on any map. I'd found it anyway, or it had found me. The turnoff had appeared suddenly, marked by a weathered wooden sign so faded I'd almost missed it. The moment I'd turned onto that road, the world had changed. The quality of light was different here, thicker somehow. The shadows didn't move right. They clung to trees and rocks with an almost physical weight, and it was quiet, unnaturally so. No birds, no insects, just the sound of my car's engine and the whisper of wind through dead leaves. I rounded a bend and saw it. Grimwood Manor rose from the hillside like a tombstone. 3 stories of gray stone and dark wood. Windows like closed eyes, a peaked roof that reminded me of a church or a prison. It was smaller than I had imagined from the word manor, but there was something about its proportions that seemed wrong. The windows were too narrow, the walls too thick, the whole structure slightly off-kilter, as if it had been built according to plans drawn by someone who understood architecture, but had never quite grasped the purpose of houses. I parked in the overgrown driveway, my hands white-knuckled on the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to reverse, to drive back to that abandoned church and keep going until I hit a major highway. But something stronger, curiosity or obligation, or perhaps just the stubborn refusal to believe in supernatural nonsense, pushed me to turn off the engine. The silence that followed was absolute. I got out, my shoes crunching on gravel. The air smelled wrong, not bad exactly, but off, like ozone before a storm, mixed with something organic and old, decay maybe, or time itself rotting. The front door was massive, oak gone almost black with age, with a tarnished brass knocker shaped like a raven. The key Theodore Wren had given me was brass, heavy and ornate. It slid into the lock with surprising ease, turning smoothly despite the decades of disuse. The door swung open silently. The interior was dark, lit only by the weak afternoon light filtering through grimy windows. I found a switch by the door and flipped it. Nothing, of course. The power was off. Wren had mentioned that in his usual careful way. Utilities were disconnected after Mr. Grimwood's passing. You'll want to make arrangements. I pulled out my phone to use the flashlight, then remembered it was dead. My rental car's glove box had a flashlight. I'd seen it when I'd picked up the vehicle. I started to turn back to the car, then froze. There were footprints in the dust, not mine. These were older. The dust settled into them. They led from the door deeper into the house, a single pair of shuffling steps, large feet, wearing what looked like soft-soled shoes, Silas's last walk through his home. I followed them with my eyes as they crossed the entrance hall, passed under a chandelier wrapped in cobwebs, and disappeared down a hallway to the left, toward what I assumed was the basement. Something creaked upstairs. Just the house settling, I told myself. Old houses make noises. Another creak, deliberate, like a footstep. "Hello?" My voice came out weaker than I had intended. "Is someone here?" Silence. Then, so faint, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. The sound of a door closing. This was insane. I was standing in a dead man's house, alone, as the sun set, with no working phone and a journal full of ravelings about ritual sacrifices and hungry doors. The rational thing to do was leave, come back tomorrow with an electrician and maybe a priest. But the footprints in the dust drew my eye again, and I thought of Silas, dying alone down there in the dark, trying to hold back something he believed was real. Whether or not it was, he died believing it. I owed him that much to at least look, to see if there really was a door in the basement, or if this was all just the sad delusion of a lonely old man. I made my way back to the car, grabbed the flashlight, and steeled myself. The beam was strong and steady when I clicked it on, cutting through the gloom of the entrance hall. The footprints led me through a parlor frozen in time. Furniture from the 1960s, still arranged for conversations that would never happen, and into a kitchen where dishes sat in a sink filled with years of dust. A calendar on the wall showed September 1988, the last feeding. Beyond the kitchen was a door, heavy wood, reinforced with iron bands. A basement door that looked more like it belonged on a castle dungeon. It was ajar. I played my flashlight through the gap. Stone steps led down into darkness. The air coming up from below was cold and carried that same wrong smell, stronger now. My hand trembled as I pulled the door wider. The hinges shrieked. I started down the stairs, each step a small act of will. The temperature dropped with each descent, my breath starting to fog. The walls were stone, rough-hewn and damp, old. Older than the house above, I thought. These weren't basement walls built in the 1900s. These were foundation stones from something earlier. The stairs ended in a large cellar. My flashlight beam swept across the space, catching glimpses, stone floor, exposed beams overhead, shelves lined with jars whose contents I didn't want to identify. And there on the floor in the center of the room, exactly where Silas had been found, the circle. I approached slowly, my light trembling over the scene. The chalk marks were still visible, though partially disturbed. 7 points of a heptagram, each point marked with a symbol that made my eyes hurt to look at too long. Candles, melted down to nubs at each point, and in the center, a dark stain that could have been blood or wine or nothing at all. But the most striking thing was the absence. There should have been a body. Police would have removed it, obviously, but there was no police tape, no indication that this had been a crime scene, just the remnants of whatever Silas had been doing in his final moments. I turned in a slow circle, my flashlight searching for the northeast corner. There, a wall that looked solid stone, but when I pressed on it, where the mortar should have been, one of the stones shifted slightly, a false wall. My fingers found the edges of the loose stone and pulled. It came away easily, revealing a dark space behind. I angled my flashlight inside. The hidden chamber was small, barely more than a closet carved into the foundation, and it was full. Candles, dozens of white candles wrapped in oilcloth. A wooden box containing what looked like salt, a knife with an iron blade, its edge still sharp, and a book, the grimoire. It was exactly as Silas had described. Black leather, copper clasp, ancient. I reached for it with a hand that didn't feel like my own, my fingers closing on leather that was warm to the touch. As soon as I made contact, I heard it knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks coming from somewhere in the basement. I spun, my flashlight slashing across the darkness, trying to locate the source. The knocking came again, and this time I could place it. It was coming from the wall, the far wall of the basement, past the circle, hidden in the deepest shadows. If you hear knocking from the other side before you begin, it's too late. Silas's words burned in my memory. I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to drop everything and run. But my feet carried me forward instead, toward that wall, toward the knocking that grew louder, more insistent. My flashlight found it, the door. It was exactly as described, black wood, covered in carvings that predated language, no visible hinges or handle. But what the journal hadn't mentioned, what Silas hadn't written, was that the door was beautiful, horribly, hypnotically beautiful. The carvings seemed to move in the flashlight beam, shifting and rearranging themselves into patterns that almost made sense, that hovered just on the edge of comprehension. And it was open, just a crack, no more than an inch, but definitely open. From that crack came the smell I'd noticed earlier, concentrated now until it was almost overwhelming. Not decay exactly, something worse, something that suggested life gone wrong, twisted into shapes it was never meant to hold. The knocking stopped. In the sudden silence, I heard breathing that wasn't my own. It was coming from the other side of the door. "Hello?" The word escaped before I could stop it. The breathing paused. Then, in a voice that sounded like it was speaking through layers of water and stone and time, "Cassandra." It knew my name. Cassandra Vale, last of Grimwoods. The debt is overdue. I stumbled backward, my flashlight beam dancing wildly. This wasn't possible. This wasn't real. But the voice continued, each word an effort, as if speaking was a tremendous act of will for whatever was on the other side. Open the door. Step through. Pay what is owed. "No," I whispered, then louder. "No, I didn't make this bargain." A sound like laughter, if laughter could be made of grinding stone. "Blood carries debt. You are Grimwood. You are ours." The door creaked, opening another inch. Through the widening gap I could see nothing. Not darkness. Darkness at least has depth, has dimension. This was absence, a void that hurt to look at, that pulled at the eyes and the mind and something deeper. And in that absence, something moved. I ran. Up the stairs, through the kitchen, across the parlor. Behind me, I heard the door opening further, the hinges screaming with a sound that was almost words, almost a name. My name. I burst out the front door into twilight. The sun had set while I'd been in the basement. Had it really been that long? It felt like minutes. I fumbled for my car keys, my hands shaking so badly I dropped them twice. Behind me, the manor's front door stood open, a rectangle of deeper darkness in the gathering gloom. And from inside, I heard footsteps. Not Silas's shuffling steps. These were different, heavier, wrong. I got the car started just as something appeared in the doorway. I didn't let myself look. I threw the car into reverse, tires spitting gravel, and spun around. My headlights swept across the manor's facade, and for just an instant I saw it. A figure, tall and impossibly thin, standing in the doorway. Its shape was wrong, its proportions suggested too many joints, too many angles, and where its face should have been was that same awful absence, that void that pulled at the mind. Then I was racing down Mercy Hill Road, treaties whipping past, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The car's speedometer crept past 60, past 70 on the narrow, winding road. Too fast, way too fast, but not fast enough. Because in my rearview mirror, illuminated by my taillights, something was following me. It didn't run, it didn't walk, it moved in a way that shouldn't be possible. covering ground and lurching impossible strides that ate up distance. One moment it was at the manor's gate, the next it was rounding the first bend behind me. I pressed the accelerator harder, my engine screaming in protest. The road twisted and turned, and I took the curves without slowing, tires squealing, the car tilting dangerously. And still it gained. I could see it more clearly now in the mirror. It was tall, 7 feet at least, and its movement was all wrong, as if it was learning how to interact with physical space and hadn't quite mastered the rules. Arms too long, legs that bent at too many points, and that face. I looked away, my stomach churning. Some things shouldn't be seen. The stone church appeared ahead, my one landmark on this nightmare road. If I could reach Route 44, if I could get back to civilization, maybe it would stop following. Maybe it couldn't leave Mercy Hill. I rocketed past the church, my car fishtailing as I made the turn under Route 44. The impact of the paved road after the rough country lane nearly sent me into a spin, but I held it, straightening out and pushing the accelerator to the floor. My mirror showed empty road behind me. It was gone. I drove for 30 minutes before I dared to slow down, my hands cramped on the wheel, my heart still racing. The road was empty, normal. Other cars appeared, their headlights reassuring in their ordinariness. I passed a gas station, bright and fluorescent, a shopping plaza, a McDonald's, the real world, safe and mundane and wonderfully boring. I pulled into a rest stop and sat in my car, engine running, lights on, and tried to process what had happened. It was real, all of it, the door, the debt, the thing that had come through. Silas hadn't been crazy. He'd been a prisoner, bound by a bargain made generations before his birth, trying desperately to hold back something that shouldn't exist. And now that responsibility had fallen to me. I pulled out the journal, which I'd somehow had the presence of mind to grab. The grimoire was on the passenger seat, its black leather surface seeming to absorb the car's interior light rather than reflect it. I opened the journal to a page I'd skipped before, near the end. Silas's handwriting was different here, shakier, more desperate. October 3rd, 2013. The door opened 3 days ago. I felt it the moment it happened, a tearing sensation in my chest, as if something had been ripped away. I tried to perform the ritual late, thought perhaps I could reseal it, but the grimoire burned my hands when I touched it. The time has passed. The bargain is broken. It came through last night. I saw it from my bedroom window, standing in the yard, looking up at me. It didn't need to speak. I understood. The feeding is overdue, and it will have what it's owed, one way or another. I'm going down to the basement now. I'll try to reason with it, try to explain that there is someone coming who can make things right. My great niece, the last of our line. If she's reading this, then I failed. And I'm sorry, Cassandra. So very sorry. But know this, it can be stopped. The ritual can still work, even now, but it requires more. The debt has grown with time, and hunger makes demands. The original offering will no longer suffice. It will require. The entry ended there, mid-sentence. Whatever Silas had been about to write, he'd never finished, or he'd decided not to write it at all. I flipped through the remaining pages, but they were blank, except for one final entry, written in a different hand, shakier, barely legible. She's coming. I can hear her in the walls. Tell Cassandra to run. Tell her to break the line. No children, no heirs. Let the Grimwood name die and the debt with it. It's the only way. Silas. Final words. The date was September 22nd, 2013. The day he died. I sat there in the fluorescent glow of the rest stop, surrounded by families getting snacks and truckers grabbing coffee, and realized the terrible truth. I couldn't run far enough. The thing that had come through the door was bound to the Grimwood bloodline. It would follow me across oceans, across continents, until the debt was paid. My phone suddenly buzzed to life, making me jump. The screen showed dozens of missed calls and messages, all from the same number, Theodore Wen. I called him back with trembling fingers. He answered on the first ring. "Miss Vale, thank God. Are you safe? Safe is relative, I said, my voice hoarse. You knew what was in that house. A long pause. I suspected. Silas, he told me things over the years, pieces of the story, enough to know that the Grimwood family carried a burden that shouldn't be possible. I tried to warn you. Not hard enough. Would you have listened? Would you have believed me if I'd told you there was a door in that basement that opened to somewhere else? That your family has been feeding something for 8 generations? He was right. I wouldn't have believed, not until I'd seen it myself. The journal, I said. Silas wrote that the ritual can still work, but it requires more than the original offering. What did he mean? Another pause, longer this time. Miss Vale, I don't think... Tell me! I found notes. After Silas died, when I was sorting through his papers, research he'd been conducting for decades, trying to find a way to end the bargain. He'd discovered something in the old family records, a clause that no one had understood until it was too late. What clause? The debt can be transferred. If a Grimwood willingly takes the place of the offering, enters the door of their own free will, the bargain is satisfied and the debt is absorbed. The door seals permanently, but it requires a sacrifice, I finished. A human sacrifice. A Grimwood, yes. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of 8 generations settle on my shoulders. This was why Silas had never married, never had children. He'd understood that continuing the line only prolonged the suffering. He'd tried to end it by letting the line die with him, but he'd failed to account for me, a great niece he'd never known existed, the child of a family member who'd left Mercy Hill generations ago and never looked back, until their death had brought their orphaned daughter back into the fold. There has to be another way, I said. If there is, Silas never found it, and he spent 60 years looking. I thought of that thing following my car, its impossible movements, the way it had known my name. What happens if I don't do the ritual? If I just keep running? It will follow you, and it will get stronger. Every day the debt remains unpaid, it grows. Eventually, he trailed off. Eventually what? Eventually it won't just want you. The bargain was for protection, Ms. Vale. Protection for the Grimwood family, yes, but also for the surrounding area, for the world, perhaps. Silas believed that what's behind that door, there's more than one of them, an entire population, for lack of a better word. The door is a seal, a barrier, and the feeding ritual maintains that seal. Without it, they all come through? That was his fear. I sat in my car, engine idling, surrounded by normalcy, and tried to comprehend the magnitude of what I'd inherited. Not just a house or money, but a responsibility that spanned generations, a debt that demanded either perpetual servitude or ultimate sacrifice. I need to think, I said finally. Miss Vale, Cassandra, I understand this is overwhelming, but time is not on your side. The longer the door remains open, the harder it will be to seal. How long do I have? I don't know. But Silas wrote that once it's free, it must feed within 7 days, or it begins to deteriorate, to fade back to its realm, but not before causing significant damage. 7 days. I'd escaped the manor tonight. That was day 1. I had 6 days to make a decision that would define the rest of my life, or end it. I'll call you, I said, and hung up before he could respond. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in a motel room 3 towns over, every light blazing, the grimoire on the table in front of me. I hadn't opened it yet. Something about it radiated wrongness, as if the book itself was a door to somewhere I shouldn't look. But I needed to understand, needed to know exactly what the ritual entailed. My hand hovered over the copper clasp. Don't! I spun around so fast, I nearly fell out of my chair. A woman stood in the corner of my room, young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair and eyes that looked familiar. She wore a dress from another century, and I could see the wall through her. What are you? I stammered. Mercy Grimwood, she said, her voice distant, as if traveling through water. Malachi's daughter. I've been watching the house for a very long time. You're a ghost? She smiled sadly. Among other things, I'm bound to the manor, to the door, as you'll be bound if you perform the ritual. Death doesn't end the obligation, Cassandra. It just changes its nature. I felt ice form in my stomach. Silas never mentioned. Silas didn't know. Not until it was too late.
The ritual doesn't just seal the door, it binds the person who performs it to the house, to the land. Even in death, you'll be a guardian, watching, waiting, unable to leave or rest until another Grimwood takes your place. But Silas is dead. He's not, isn't he? She gestured to the window. Look! I didn't want to, but I did. In the parking lot below, illuminated by the motel's flickering lights, stood a figure, an old man in dated clothes, his face gaunt and drawn. He looked up at my window, and even from this distance I could see the resigned sadness in his eyes. Silas. He tried to break free, tried to die without performing the ritual, hoping the line would end with him, but the debt wouldn't release him. Now he's trapped between life and death, watching as the thing he feared most comes to pass.
I watched as another figure joined Silas in the parking lot, a woman in Victorian dress, then a man in colonial garb. One by one they appeared, generations of Grimwoods, all bound to the debt even in death. How many? I whispered. All of us, Mercy said. Every Grimwood who's performed the ritual. We're all still there, Cassandra, still guarding that door, still paying for Malachi's desperate bargain. I turned from the window, anger rising to replace the fear. Then I won't do it. I'll let the debt go unpaid. Let whatever comes through do its worst. At least I'll be free. Mercy's expression hardened. And the innocents, the people in the surrounding towns who'll be the first to fall, the children who'll wake to find that thing standing over their beds, you're willing to sacrifice them for your freedom? They're not my responsibility. No, she agreed. But they'll die nonetheless, and their blood will be on your hands as surely as if you'd killed them yourself. I sank back into the chair, my head in my hands. There has to be another way, some loophole, some escape clause. There is, Mercy said softly, the one Silas discovered, the permanent seal. Suicide, I said bitterly, trading my life for theirs. Not suicide, sacrifice. There's a difference, and not just your death, your willing replacement. If you enter the door, if you cross the threshold and become the offering yourself, the bargain is fulfilled in a way it's never been before. The debt is paid in full, not just delayed. The door seals permanently, and all of us, all the bound Grimwoods, are finally released. I looked up at her. You'd be free? She nodded. All of us, generations of suffering ended, but only if you choose it willingly. That's the key. It must be your choice, made without coercion. That's the price of permanent freedom for everyone but me. Yes, her image flickered, fading slightly. I don't have much time. The connection between our world and yours is growing thinner. But before I go, you should know something, Cassandra. You're stronger than you think. I've been watching you through Silas's eyes. You've survived things that would have broken most people. Being alone, being orphaned, building a life from nothing. You're a Grimwood, and we've always been survivors. Surviving isn't the same as being strong enough to die. No, she agreed, but it's a start. The choice is yours. It's always been yours. That's the one thing the bargain can't take. Your will, your decision. Whatever you choose, I hope you find peace. She faded completely, leaving me alone in the too bright room with the grimoire and my thoughts. I opened my laptop, which had mysteriously started working again, and began to research. Not the supernatural, that was beyond research, but the practical. The town nearest to Mercy Hill, Ashford, had a population of about 8,000. The surrounding area, maybe 50,000 people, all of them going about their lives, completely unaware that their continued existence depended on a woman they'd never met, making an impossible choice. I thought about Silas, spending 60 years alone in that house, performing the ritual every 25 years, watching his youth slip away in service to a debt he hadn't incurred. I thought about Mercy, barely more than a child when she'd first performed the ritual, watching through ghostly eyes as her descendants repeated her burden. And I thought about myself, Cassie Vale, freelance designer, coffee addict, fond of bad bad movies and worse puns. A woman who'd never hurt anyone, who'd spent her whole life just trying to survive and maybe be happy along the way. Was it fair that I should die for a bargain made in 1847? No, but life wasn't fair. Death wasn't fair. And sometimes the only choice was between unfair and catastrophic. I picked up my phone and called Theodore Wren. It was 3 a.m., but he answered immediately as if he'd been waiting. "I need to know something," I said without preamble. "The people in Ashford, do they know about the Grimwoods, about what's been protecting them?" "No," he said. "They think the family is just eccentric recluses. The disappearances over the years, the offerings, were explained away as runaways or accidents, so they have no idea that their lives have depended on my family's sacrifice. None. If I don't seal the door, how long before the first death?" A pause. "Based on Silas's notes, no more than 3 days. It will start with the most vulnerable, the elderly, the sick, children. Then it will spread. Children." I closed my eyes, remembering foster homes and social workers and the constant fear that came with being unwanted, remembering what it felt like to be vulnerable and alone. "If I do this," I said slowly, "if I perform the ritual, the final one, what happens to me? According to Silas's research, you cross the threshold. The door accepts you as payment and seals permanently. What happens after?" He trailed off. "I die. Probably, or something worse than death." Silas wasn't clear on that part. Great, comforting. "I'm sorry, Cassandra. I wish I had better answers." I looked at the grimoire, at my reflection in the motel room's mirror. I looked tired, scared, but under that I saw something else. The same stubborn determination that had gotten me through 26 years of life without family or security or any reason to believe things would ever get better. I'd survived this long by making hard choices. This was just one more. "Tell me how to do it," I said. "Tell me how to seal the door permanently." I returned to Mercy Hill the next afternoon. Daylight seemed safer, though I knew it was an illusion. What waited in that basement didn't care about the position of the sun. The manor looked different in daylight, less menacing, more sad. Just an old house falling into disrepair, inhabited by ghosts and bad memories. The front door still stood open from my hasty retreat the night before. I sat in my car for a long time, the engine idling, trying to gather courage I wasn't sure I possessed. In the passenger seat was everything I needed: the grimoire, the ritual supplies from the hidden chamber, and a handwritten set of instructions from Theodore Wren, compiled from Silas's notes. The permanent sealing required all the elements of the standard ritual, plus one additional component: my willingness to cross the threshold, to step through the door and become the offering myself. Wren had been clear, there was no coming back. Once I crossed, the door would seal behind me, and I would be elsewhere, in whatever realm existed on the other side, with whatever things waited there. "You're stronger than you think," Mercy had said. I didn't feel strong. I felt terrified. But I also felt determined, because I'd made my choice, and once I made a choice, I saw it through. That was the one thing foster care had taught me. When you have no one to rely on but yourself, you become very good at finishing what you start. I grabbed my supplies and walked into the house. The basement door was still ajar. I descended the stairs slowly, flashlight in hand, my footsteps echoing off stone walls. The temperature dropped with each step, my breath fogging in the cold air. The door was open wider now, not much, maybe 6 inches, but definitely wider than before. Through the gap came that same absence of light, that void that hurt to perceive. And from somewhere beyond, I heard sounds, whispers in languages that predated human speech, scratching, as if something was testing the edges of the opening. And underneath it all, a low, rhythmic pulsing, like a heartbeat made of stone and hunger. I set down my supplies and pulled out Wren's instructions. My hands were shaking, making the paper rattle. 1. Prepare the circle as normal, 7-pointed star in salt, candles at each point. 2. Position yourself at the center, facing the door. 3. Light the candles while speaking the opening words, written phonetically below. 4. Make the blood offering, 3 drops into the bronze bowl. 5. Speak the binding words. 6. Open the grimoire to the marked page. 7. Read the final incantation. 8. When the door opens fully, step through. Do not hesitate. Do not look back. The door will remain open for the count of 7 heartbeats. Below this were the words themselves, written in phonetic English, but clearly not of any modern language. Looking at them made my head ache, as if my brain was rejecting the information. I took a deep breath and began. The salt circle went down smoothly, my hand surprisingly steady as I poured it in a perfect ring, the candles placed at 7 points. I stood in the center and pulled out the first match. Etor, Null Cathun, I read from the paper, my voice echoing strangely in the stone chamber. The words felt wrong in my mouth, angular and sharp, as if my tongue wasn't meant to form them. I lit the first candle. It flared to life with a blue-white flame that cast no shadows. Matak, Souverain, second candle. The temperature dropped further. Ice began to form on the walls. Dre Keith, Narhum, third candle. The scratching sounds from beyond the door grew louder, more insistent. I continued through all 7 candles, each word of opening causing a physical reaction. The air grew thicker, the light dimmer, the very space around me seeming to warp and bend. By the time I finished, the door was pulsing, its black wood surface rippling like water. The iron blade was cold in my hand. I pressed it to my palm and drew it across in one quick motion. Blood welled up, hot against my suddenly freezing skin. I let 3 drops fall into the bronze bowl I'd placed at my feet. The moment the blood touched metal, the door swung open another foot. I could see through it now, not into another room, but into somewhere else, entirely. A place where geometry didn't work right, where walls curved in impossible directions, where things moved in the darkness with too many limbs and too few faces. And I could hear it clearly now. The voice that had spoken my name the night before. But this time it wasn't words, it was a feeling, a knowledge, planted directly in my mind. Come, the debt awaits, the hunger awaits. Come and be consumed and completed and made whole in the dissolution of self. I spoke the binding words, my voice steady despite the terror clawing at my chest. With each syllable, I felt something tighten around me, invisible chains perhaps, or the weight of 8 generations of obligation settling on my shoulders. The grimoire was heavy in my hands as I opened it to the marked page. The text was in that same pre-language script, but now I could read it. The ritual had opened something in my mind, some understanding that transcended mere words. I read the final incantation. The door slammed open. The void beyond it was absolute, a darkness so complete it seemed to have physical mass. And from that darkness, I could feel attention focusing on me, not from one entity, but from many. A host of hungry things, all waiting, all watching. Step through, the voice urged. End the debt. Seal the door. Save them all. I thought of the people in Ashford, sleeping in their beds, completely unaware. I thought of the children who would wake tomorrow morning expecting another ordinary day. I thought of Silas and Mercy, and all the Grimwoods who'd suffered to keep those ordinary days possible.
And I thought of myself, Cassie Vale, who'd never asked for this, who'd never wanted to be a hero or a martyr, who just wanted to live a simple life and maybe find some happiness along the way. But sometimes we don't get what we want. Sometimes we only get to choose how we face what we're given. I took a step toward the door. The voice changed, became eager. Yes, come, cross the threshold, complete the bargain. Another step. I was at the edge of the circle now, my foot touching the salt line. Behind me, I heard a sound. Footsteps on the stairs. I turned to see Silas materialize, his ghostly form more solid now than it had been before. "You don't have to do this," he said, his voice filled with decades of regret.
I never wanted this burden to fall on you. Let me. I'll go through. I'll be the offering. You can't, I said gently. You're already dead. It has to be a living Grimwood. Then find another way. There's always another way. Is there? I gestured at the open door, at the things moving in the darkness beyond. You spent 60 years looking for an alternative. Did you find one? His silence was answer enough. More ghosts were appearing now. Mercy and others I didn't recognize. 8 generations of Grimwoods, all manifesting in this moment, all watching to see if their suffering would finally end. If I do this, I said to them, you're all free? Mercy nodded. The debt is paid in full. The door seals permanently. And we can finally rest. I looked at each of them in turn. These people who'd shared my blood, who'd suffered the same impossible burden, who'd spent lifetimes in service to a debt they'd never agreed to pay. Then it's worth it, I said. I stepped across the salt line. The grimoire in my hands burst into flames, black fire that didn't burn me but consumed the book in seconds, leaving only ash. The ash rose, swirling in an impossible wind, and flew through the open door into the void beyond. The door shuddered, beginning to close. I had maybe 3 seconds before it sealed completely. I took one last look at the basement, at the ghosts watching me with expressions of sorrow and relief and gratitude. I thought of Theodore Wren, who I'd asked to handle my affairs, to tell my few friends that I'd decided to travel abroad indefinitely. I thought of my small apartment in Seattle, my unfinished client projects, my ordinary life that I'd never really appreciated until this moment. And then I thought, enough running, enough surviving, enough living half a life because I was afraid to fully commit to anything. If I was going to die, or whatever this was, I would do it with my eyes open and my will unbroken. I stepped through the door. The sensation was immediate and total. It felt like being unmade at the molecular level and reconstructed wrong. Like every atom of my being was being examined and judged and found wanting. The darkness wasn't empty. It was full of things, of presences, that pressed in from all sides with suffocating attention. Grimwood, the voices said, speaking in unison now. The debt is paid. The sacrifice is accepted. The door is sealed. I tried to speak, to ask what would happen to me now, but I had no mouth, no body, I realized with dawning horror. I was consciousness without form, awareness without anchor. You are ours now, the voices said, as the bargain demands. You will serve as the seal, the lock, the warden. Your essence will hold the door closed, will prevent our kind from crossing into your realm. For as long as consciousness remains. Eternity, in other words, or something close to it. But even as panic threatened to overwhelm me, I felt something else, relief. The door was sealed. The people of Ashford would wake up tomorrow morning safely. The Grimwood ghosts were free, and I was something else now. Something neither alive nor dead, neither here nor there. A guardian, as Mercy had said, but not bound to the house or the land. Bound to the door itself, my will and consciousness woven into its structure, my determination the lock that kept it closed. It wasn't the life I'd wanted, but it was a purpose. And after 26 years of drifting, of surviving, but never quite living, there was a strange peace in having a purpose, even one as terrible as this. Rest now, the voices said, almost gently. Your vigil has begun. And I did. Theodore Wren stood at the edge of the property, looking up at Grimwood Manor. It had been exactly 1 year since Cassidy Vale had disappeared. 1 year since he'd received her final phone call, telling him what she planned to do. The house looked different now, quieter somehow. The oppressive weight that had hung over it for generations was gone. He'd felt it the moment Cassidy had sealed the door, a sudden lifting as if the world had taken a deep breath and released tension it had held for nearly 2 centuries. He'd come back monthly to check on the property as Cassidy had requested in the documents she had him draw up. Everything was in order. The house was to be maintained but never sold, never torn down. A trust fund she had established, using money from Silas's estate, would pay for its upkeep in perpetuity. A monument, she had called it, to remember what was sacrificed.
He'd tried to talk her out of it, of course, had begged her to find another way. But she'd been adamant, and he'd respected that. She was stronger than she knew, braver than she believed.
As he turned to leave, something caught his eye. There, in one of the upper windows, was a figure, pale and indistinct, but definitely human-shaped. He squinted, trying to make out details. For just a moment, he could have sworn it was her, Cassandra, looking down at him with an expression that might have been sad or might have been peaceful. Then she raised one hand in what could have been a wave or a farewell and vanished. Ren stood there for a long time, staring at the empty window. Then he nodded once, a gesture of respect and acknowledgement, and walked back to his car. Behind him, Grimwood Manor stood silent and still. In its basement, a door of black wood remained sealed, held closed by a will that would not, could not break. And in whatever realm existed beyond that door, Cassandra Vale stood eternal watch, a guardian against horrors the world would never know existed. She'd been alone all her life, but in the end, her solitude had saved thousands. It wasn't the ending she'd wanted, but it was the ending she'd chosen. And sometimes that's enough. Thank you for joining me tonight on The Pale Watcher. I hope this story stays with you, as the best stories do. Not to frighten, but to remind us that even ordinary people are capable of extraordinary sacrifice. Sweet dreams wherever you are. And remember, some debts are inherited, but how we pay them is always our choice. Until next time.